I asked them, in your speciality, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? And they answer yes, or if they say no, yes at some point in the past. So then I asked them, that's ADD, ADHD, or mild dyslexia. And this is especially important for parents who don't want to spend $5,000 on a neuropsych evaluation. So next thing I ask, fingers, keyboard, fingers, keyboard. The idea's in your head. You take your fingers, you put it on the keyboard. Does the idea fly out of your head, leaving you with an empty brain? And for severe dyslexia, they answer yes. So then I tell them, based on those two questions, what we're going to do is we're going to force your brain to organize itself, and we're going to use writing as a measurable output. So again, we're going to force the brain to organize itself using writing as a measurable output. Is that how you'd like to overcome your concerns? And they say yes.
Welcome to the podcast ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. Please join us as we discuss parenting adult children and the unique struggles that it comes along with.
Welcome back to ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. I'm your host, James Moffitt. This is the podcast where we explore the joys and challenges of parenting our grown-up kids with wisdom, patience, and a little bit of humor. Today, we're joined by Russell VanBrocklin. How you doing, Russell?
Thanks. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Russell's a man whose wisdom is rooted in both life experience and a deep commitment to truth, liberty, and family. Hey, Russell, do me a favor and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
My name's Russell VanBrocklin. I'm also known as the Dyslexic Professor. And when I'm working with parents, especially in this age group, it's normally for two reasons. Parents come to me because their child's in college, close to failing out, or has failed out, or they tend to have issues with getting employment, failure to launch after graduation. And I tend to help parents with both those things.
Awesome. Well, tell us how you got into this.
Well, I kind of had my own college problems and failure to launch as well. It started in the late 90s, when I did the New York State Assembly internship program. Because of my severe dyslexia, I had a first grade reading and writing issue, so they put me in the Majority Leaders Program and Counsel's office with 3 administrative assistants. At the end of it, I gave my research as a oral presentation instead of a written report, which was a typical accommodation for me at the time. And they gave me a recommendation of 3.67 for a GPA, an A- for 15 credits. Well, SUNY Center at Buffalo said, we don't like those accommodations. So here's your 15 credits of F. Only time in the history of the program. And I said, enough, dyslexics aren't going to be going through this discrimination anymore. And then I decided to solve it.
Okay. Awesome.
Well, the next step was I decided to audit law school classes after graduation. So I went to law school with a first grade reading and writing ability, and people thought I was crazy. My second day in contracts, Professor Warner, the dyslexic professor I went to see, he asked me a question, and what they do in law school is they use the Socratic method. And they keep asking you questions, even if you don't know the answer, to embarrass you. The idea is to train you as quickly as possible to argue any point of law at any time, at any side. Well, I didn't blink like all my classmates. I responded exactly. Everything just slowed down. It was the first time in my life this happened. And I could see where he was going 3, 4, 5, 6 steps ahead. He knew what I couldn't beat him. He couldn't beat me. At the end of 15 minutes of us going back and forth like crazy, he said, Russell, you couldn't be any more correct. In the interest of time, I have to move on to the next case. All my classmates looked at me with kind of awe and trepidation. The ones that continued to graduation told me they couldn't do half of what I did that first class in contracts, even after they graduated. Then I went on to property, where they were giving us quizzes. You're supposed to read the question for about 3 to 5 minutes and then answer it. And I didn't wait 3 to 5 seconds. I just answered it instantaneously. I was the first one done with the highest score. I got perfect scores like almost every time. That solved the reading. Took me another couple of years to solve the writing. And then I decided I want to take what I've learned and solve everything. And I went to the New York State Senate. And after a lot of going back and forth, they decided to fund my research. And this is important for parents whose kids are struggling in college. is we ended up going to a bunch of highly dyslexic, highly intelligent, highly motivated high school juniors and seniors with excellent family support, the ideal kids, and they were writing at the middle school grade level, 7th, 8th grade. And I gave them the writing test of entering graduate school students. That's the graduate records exam, analytical writing assessment. How do you think they did on that?
Probably pretty well.
Well, they have 7th, 8th grade writing skills. I gave them a test for entering graduate students, and they're in high school.
Oh, okay.
How do you think they did?
Maybe not so well. I don't know.
0 percentile. Most of them. A few scored in the 6 because of analytical skills. Spelling and grammar was horrendous. The senior professor, her name was Dr. Lechka, she was a SUNY distinguished professor in psychology. He said these kids will not make it through the first semester of college. The writing is just absolutely horrendous. So then we took them through one class period a day for the school year. Susan Ford was their best special ed teacher. And at the end of that, all the students scored in the 30th to 70th percentile of entering graduate school students. Their spelling and grammar was clean at the graduate level. Susan spent almost no time on spelling and grammar, auto-corrected. They all went to college. They all graduated, no accommodations, and they're all employed immediately on graduation. Cost to the state less than $900 a student. So that was the starting point.
Let me tell you a story. So my wife is a special ed teacher, and she's got her bachelor's degree in psychology, and she's got her master's degree in teaching or whatever it is, special education, I guess. And I remember when she was taking a lot of online courses, and so she's taking graduate courses, and she was part of a group of people. They had a essay, or they had some kind of project they were all supposed to work on. And I remember her telling me that it was scary that these people that already had their bachelor's degrees, they couldn't string a sentence together. They couldn't write hardly at all. And so she wound up doing the group essay herself. She wound up just doing it herself because they couldn't put a simple sentence together. And I've seen that. I graduated high school in 1980, and when I was in third, fourth grade, fifth grade, maybe, I had an excellent reading teacher. And so I would like to think that my reading and reading comprehension skill levels way up there. And I write well as well. I like to write. And I've run across a lot of people that they talk fine. They have a grasp on the English language. But when it comes to writing a simple sentence or putting a story together or something like that, they don't have a clue. They don't know how to do it. And so that's just indicative of the lack of education that we have here in America, especially here in South Carolina. I can speak to that.
Well, what I just told you, that course, like for your wife to learn that process, took less than 4 hours. All right. And at the end, I'm not talking about SATs where they can't write. I'm talking about the GRE. And I can tell you that, not being able to string a sentence together, this was graded by one of the top living psychologists in New York State very harshly. And all those grammar concerns and couldn't write the basics of writing, all that was clean at the entering graduate school level. Fixed the whole 7, 8 grade level increases in 1 year. And I'm about to show you things that's going to completely change how your wife views dyslexia. First thing is, in my field, if you're going to claim you're going to have something radically new that is completely different than an Orton Gillingham multi-sensory approach, you have to be very cautious. Where is this coming from? My research is coming from this book. Let me see if I can get it in there.
Okay.
It's Overcoming Dyslexia from Yale. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Okay. This is the book in my field. And here's dyslexia. See if I can.
Okay.
That's it. Now, I'm not going to use non-impaired because I find that kind of insulting. I'm going to call that the gen ed brain. Look at the back part of the dyslexic brain. Do you see how there's almost no neural activity?
Right.
Okay. Now look at the gen ed brain. Do you see how it's going crazy? Okay. Now look at the front end of the dyslexic brain. See how it's about 2.5 times overactive? Okay. That is what my research is based on. This book came out in 2003. So what Yale says is this part of the book deals with two things. It deals with articulation followed by word analysis. So that first program, I said, we focused on articulation, very little word analysis. But when I presented this in New York City, I thought I was done. I said, we solved dyslexia for the ideal students. The college professors came to me and said, some of your students scored above average on the GRE writing assessment. We don't care. We want something called the craft of research. Are you familiar with that at all?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Came out in 1995 at the University of Chicago. It was based on, it was teaching their grad students who didn't know how to write advanced research papers. And it came out with a concept called context, get everybody on the same page, problem, state the problem, and then come up with a solution where the reader learns something substantive. If you can't come up with something substantive, if there's not something at least moderately original, this is what they want as well. Even if they're not familiar with the book, they look over, they said, yeah, that's what I want. It's like, okay, so the GRE is not enough. I got to show them how to deal with this. And the university professors exceedingly want this. And just to show you how important this was, two examples: one in university, one in employment. She specifically wanted to go to a specific university to work with a specific professor, not as a graduate student, but as an undergrad, which is kind of weird. But I said, okay, we can do that. He walks into his class the first day. And after class, she says, we have this major research paper. I've learned the craft of research, not the best. I'm a lot more efficient now. And she said, can you help me go through this so I can apply the craft of research to your paper? He calls me up and says, is a high college freshman doing with the craft of research? I have a hard time getting my PhD students doing this. I said, well, we started working on this when she was in 7th grade. Now he's completely shocked. They said, we're a lot more efficient now. I said, here's her issues with it. She's good at this, not good at this. He started getting papers from her where he actually started learning things from her. He's like, I'm learning some minor points from a college freshman. So he wanted to work with her because of her reading and writing skills, and not want to work with her because of it, which he said is very rare for an undergrad student. Second point on that fact, I had a former client call me last year after he graduated he got a job, and the manager was huge into artificial intelligence. He said, I overhired. What I'm looking for is ideas from you that we can implement. So he calls me up kind of in a panic. I said, you've been trained in the craft of research. I don't care if you don't know much about AI. Talk to it, work with it, do the context, problem, solution. He does the context, comes back after he did the problem. I hate this. I said, well, welcome to the adult world. He finishes up with the solution, and he turns it into a 5-paragraph essay. The boss is literally going over one after the other. I can't use this. I can't use this. I can't use this. Comes to his, that's a good idea. We can use that. Guess who got to keep his job?
He did.
Yeah. So what is the craft of research and how to connect it to this? So again, I'm just going to keep coming back to the science. So that overactive front part of the brain, what I did is that's articulation and word analysis. I switched it over to word analysis followed by articulation. And then when it comes time to the context, that is your basic 5 questions. So your basic who, what, when, where, how, why. I'm sorry, 6. Who, what, when, where, how, why. I purposely put why at the end because normally that's the most complicated one. When we're dealing in the academic setting, I make sure that each time we're in a paragraph for a paper, and your wife's a special ed teacher, so she can verify this. If you have a quote per paragraph, at least one sentence, and then you discuss that quote, can you see how that makes a paper, what's a lot of students call it a non-BS paper? It's not where you just write anything that you think sounds good, but each paragraph having a quote makes it a real paper.
Okay.
Okay. When they get out of college, I drop the quote and I say, focus on what you're trying to get everybody on the same page. Go and research this and find quotes or studies that back up whatever you're trying to work on. Really do your research and put that all into, find out what the major points are, and then answer the who, what, when, where, how, why. And that might go on for pages. That's the context. It's getting everybody on the same page. Then what we do to try to come up with solutions, there's two levels. The obvious solution that they expect you to come up with, for everyday business problems, or if you're answering an email. And what we do is I have them work with the artificial intelligence to reduce that to a single medium to long sentence. Then we reduce that to a problem statement that's a short to medium length sentence, and then we reduce that to a universal theme. And then what I have them do for obvious questions that need to be answered is I have them take the context sentence and look through the universal theme as a lens, and then we come up with some rather obvious answers that are very specific. These are solutions you would expect a well-read student to come up with in the academia, or if you're out in the workforce, you have a problem, you come up with a context, you go through that process, and you look at the universal theme and you run it through that as a lens, and the solutions that come out are obvious ones that you can employ immediately. And once you get used to using artificial intelligence, you can do these in emails in less than a minute or two. And they're concrete solutions. If you're looking for something innovative, that takes a bit longer to explain, but typically when they're starting out their careers, they just want basic, well thought out solutions. And that takes care of it. And when parents approach me, they say, well, this sounds okay, that kind of makes sense, but how do I get my child to buy in? So have you ever found that when you're dealing with a kid at 18 through their 20s, when there's a problem, getting them to actually buy into a solution tends to be a bit of a problem?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you normally deal with that?
Well, it's a good question. You obviously you have to communicate and you have to try to find out where the resistance is coming from. Sometimes, fear is fear of the unknown, or they don't feel adequate enough to come to a solution.
When you're dealing with dyslexic students, it's a bit more complicated. What that model that I was telling you about, it's going from word analysis followed by articulation. That's step 3 of the model. The first thing that you have to realize, especially when you're dealing with academic issues in college, is for an intervention period to help them learn how to do context and at least problem, is you need to focus on their speciality, their area of extreme interest and ability. So this also works for gen ed kids, but it's absolutely critical for dyslexic. So let's just run through this with a child that you know well. And let's just call him John Doe or her Jane Doe to protect their privacy. Can you think of a specific case where the child was having a lot of trouble in college?
No, not really. You're kind of going over my head here.
Okay. All right. So can you imagine any child that your wife worked with that you knew who was having trouble in school?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So just to give you an example of what we do here is you go to your child and you say, it's a Saturday morning. You can do whatever you want. What is it? That's their speciality. That's their area of extreme interest and ability. By far, the most popular one when I do this is this guy. This is Disney's biography. And reason being is, have you ever been to Disney World?
Yes.
Do you find it's they say it's the most magical place in the world? Do you find that do you see that at all? Or
We had a child that had cancer, and Make a Wish Foundation sent the whole family to Disney World down in Orlando, Florida. And to me, of course, our situation was really unique, and so as a parent of a child with cancer, I wasn't that impressed with Disney World, honestly. But I know children probably don't have the same bias as I have, and they look at that environment through a different set of eyes, right? And I can see where, to them, especially my daughter Jessica, where that it was magical, and it was, huge blessing for her to experience that.
I'm sorry to hear about what happened to her.
Yeah, to me as an adult, I mean that whole theme park is designed for families, right? And it's designed to separate you from your money.
They're very good at that, but from what allowed that to happen. Okay, again, I'm coming back to this massive biography. There are two universal themes that deal with that. One is obvious and about 10% of the value. The second one is very hard to find. I've never had a parent find it in that book, but I've had, for this one example, their 12-year-old daughter who went and said, "Mom, Dad, here it is." And they said they couldn't believe they missed it. And then I asked, "Did I do my job for reading? Your child found something you couldn't, and she's 12." Yeah, she was working on it for about 2 years. So what I'm saying with that is if you focus on their speciality, because she really loved Disney World, she wanted to understand the magic. What was, and going through his biography, she figured out what it was. And the work I had her do, she said, if I had to do anything else outside of this, she wouldn't have done it. So another example of why the speciality is so important. Did you ever watch the original Fast and Furious?
Probably.
Okay. Do you remember the scene when Paul Walker's the got a car that looked like it came from the junkyard? They're remodeling it, and he's dealing with this computer technical genius. And he asked, "How are you not at MIT?" And the smart kid said, "Well, I got that ADD, kind of like dyslexia thing." He said, "I can do this, but I can't do other things." So, especially if your child is having trouble in college, the huge solution to break that down is number one, have them take a semester or two where they're just focusing on their speciality, things they want to take. That's a big help. Next thing, the way that they're learning. This is what I learned from senior dyslexic professors. Most of them, I asked a lot of them, did a survey, and I found a lot of them were STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And they were taking like philosophy classes, art history. I said, "Good for you." And they said, "No, we didn't like those classes. I didn't like those classes." They said, "Well, why did you take them? You didn't have to." Because they taught not from the general to the specific, but from the specific to the general. And from that, I came up with two questions that gets the dyslexic student on board. I asked them, in your speciality, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? And they answer yes, or if they say no, yes at some point in the past. So then I asked them, that's ADD, ADHD, or mild dyslexia. And this is especially important for parents who don't want to spend $5,000 on a neuropsych evaluation. So next thing I ask, fingers, keyboard, fingers, keyboard. The idea's in your head. You take your fingers, you put it on the keyboard. Does the idea fly out of your head, leaving you with an empty brain? And for severe dyslexia, they answer yes. So then I tell them, based on those two questions, what we're going to do is we're going to force your brain to organize itself, and we're going to use writing as a measurable output. So again, we're going to force the brain to organize itself using writing as a measurable output. Is that how you'd like to overcome your concerns? And they say yes. And I have them select an audio book, and then we get a printed book. And then just for example, this is my biggest one that people are interested in. And parents will say, "But my child won't do the work." I said, we're in their speciality. And here's just to show you how motivated these kids can get. This is Casey's book. 900 pages, won the Pulitzer. Took her 6 months to learn every word in that book. Every definition. You could ask her, page 362, here's the word, what's the dictionary definition? She would tell you. It took her 6 months. I never saw it before. I'll never see it again that fast. How old do you think Casey was?
12,
10.
10. Wow.
Yeah. I worked with her 15 minutes a week. She was in her room 2, 3, 4 hours a night, 6, 7 nights a week, all day during the summer, going through a simple process that I gave her because she wanted to do reading first. I do writing first. I tell my students, if you can write it, you can read it. And she knew every word. So she knew every word of the book. She got a call from the school when her mother got a call in the fall of the school when we were nearing the end of that. She was in a silent reading class. Her classmates came over, picked up her book, asked what it was, and they couldn't get past the first paragraph. She told them what every word they asked questionable. What's the definition of this? She told them. Teacher calls her mom. "I thought your daughter had a severe reading problem. She's the best reader in the class by grade levels. What's going on?" She asked me, I said, what do you think she's been doing in her room all night, night in, night out? And we worked with her for another couple of years, and she was ready for college at the end of 8th grade. So when people say this can't be done, it absolutely can be done. If a 10-year-old and 10-year-old or 11-year-old can do it, your kids in college can do it as well.
I know some adults that can't do that.
Yeah, I've run into quite a few. I have run into adults who have master's degree. As I said, I love using this as an example. What's the second and most important universal theme for the Disney magic? And none of the parents could ever have done it. I had doctors, lawyers. I mean, they're listening to the audiobook as they're going to work and back. I have their kids pointed out. Pretty much answers the question. I said, reading words is one thing. Comprehending what they're saying in an involved book is quite another. And your middle school child just outdid you. Did I do my job? And they a lot of times the parents just laugh and say, I can't believe my kid outdid me. I said, well, wait until she's in grad school. Then you'll see really what it's like for her to outdo her. That original program I told you about,
Mhm.
I had to get it approved by Professor James Collins at SUNY Center at Buffalo. He had $1.5 million grant from the federal government, wrote a book called Strategies for Struggling Writers. Guess how long it took me to get the approval since I first approached him?
I don't know.
2 weeks, little under.
Wow.
I was told it was going to take years. Graduate school dyslexics excel because we're in our speciality, in our area of extreme interest and ability, and all they care about is the generation of ideas. All right. That's all they care about. It's the currency of the realm. And we excel at that. And that's the first time when we can really, really specialize. That's what it comes down to. And when the parents ask, well, how can we deal with this? Because going to the top dyslexic college in America, it's called Landmark College. It's up in Vermont, and they are a fantastic college. You send your child there, they do solve the problems. It's also one of the most expensive private schools in the United States. It's house money. And what I tell parents is they can teach their kids at home, and that's what we show them how to do. We start off with context, problem, solution. And here's the difference thing with the approach that I'm working with. The best approach traditionally is called Orton Gillingham, multi-sensory. The older the child is, the longer it takes. So once you haven't fixed dyslexia by 4th grade or 5th grade, you're in a private dyslexic school for 4 to 5 years, and they generally run around $60,000-$80,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and the longer you wait, the longer it takes. With my approach, the older the child is, the quicker they learn. I go to where they need to end up. I don't start off at the beginning. I bring them immediately to where they need to be. So the older the kids will go through the process so much faster. So if you're in college, I've done this numerous times. If you're looking to enter a community college, it's what I like to call head and hands. These are not our grandfather's manufacturing jobs. You really do need an associate's degree to work with the machines who do the manufacturing, or you're an electrician, a plumber, going into nursing. You do auto mechanics. You need to be able to work with your head and your hands. So we go through context and problem, and that'll get you through a community college. If you're going into a 4-year school, we have to do context, problem, and solution so you can come up with something original. Here's the problem with a big part of failure to launch nowadays. And it really hit just this year. I'm sure you're familiar with the artificial intelligence. They have the guy who's the CEO of Anthropic believes in 5 years, we're going to have a 10 to 20% unemployment rate with half the kids graduating from college not getting jobs. And I can tell you that I've met so many kids who graduate this year, not dyslexic, top universities with degrees in engineering, real solid degrees, they can't get a job. So if you can't show up and provide instantaneous solutions, which is what the craft brain research shows you how to do, you're not going to do very well. If you don't know anything about artificial intelligence, what I try to tell parents is every time they come out with a new AI model, they want you to relearn prompt engineering. Now they just came out with Agent from OpenAI, ChatGPT, and now that goes and does things for you. You have to manage it. Don't need to keep doing that. If you know the craft of research, all three parts, we show you how to prompt engineer your child's brain. So they, even if they know nothing about artificial intelligence, they can just sit down and immediately communicate with it, speak to it, type to it, and immediately start managing it, guiding it, and getting results within hours. I've seen that happen every time. The child's not happy about it, but they know how to do it. They can do that. They can provide, they can guide it. They're going to be on one side. They're going to be so much more valuable, so much more productive, and they'll be compensated at a much higher rate. They can't, they're going to be on the other side, and that's looking more and more ugly.
Right.
So the simple solution for parents, now that you understand this, is what we do is we have parents, we meet with them in a weekly webinar, and we just walk you through the process. It's not difficult to teach. I've had AP English young ladies who are as young as 14 learn this process and take elementary school kids and get them up to reading and writing skills, not as quickly as parents can, but usually about 30 to 40% more time. And to solve it's not that complicated to do. And that's simply how you get past it.
Okay. So if we have parents that are listening that have a child that is dyslexic, and again, I have to say that you're the expert at this. I know, everything I know about dyslexia, you can fit on the top of my finger here, right? So I don't really, I guess I don't really I don't know how to ask an intelligent question here other than I know who my listening audience is. And let's say I have a parent that has a child that's dyslexic. Where do they start? I mean,
The first thing is I'm assuming that they're in some sort of college. So what I would recommend is your child is probably spiraling to fail out of college or getting close to it. I would say the next semester, find out what the speciality is, set them up for 12 credits in that area, and then just give them a semester of them doing whatever they like. So, for example, I had one kid who was really interested in American history. He was majoring in something else, but he loved American history. He just knew he wanted to get a job afterwards, and American history wasn't going to do it. So we gave him a semester, 12 credits of just doing that. And then I showed the mom, I hate to say this, but it's like 90% moms most of the time. I showed her how to do context and problems, and she worked with him through Zoom and walked him through the process. And he picked that up within a semester. They said college kids pick this up so much faster than high school kids. And he had his semester. He got a chance to work with it. Next semester, he went back into his major. He was getting a 3.0. It's a complete turnaround. He ended up graduating, got a good job, and success story. So I've seen that happen so many times. Or another time, it's a failure to launch because they got their degree, maybe even a master's degree. But when they go out into the workforce, they now expect students to be able to be productive like the day you walk in, like the minute you walk in. Here's something,
right.
go do it. And they just couldn't keep up with the reading and writing issues. So I said, okay, we're going to go and take 3 to 6 months. We're going to go through the context problem issue. Sometimes we'd spend another 6 months and go through the solution and show the parents, how to do this. They work with a child. They go back. They walk in. Here's a folder. Give me an immediate response, and they can. So it's simply taking the skills required in the craft of research and teaching it to your dyslexic child in a way that maximizes their understanding, focusing on their speciality, teaching from the specific to the general, and then word analysis followed by articulation, and then you're golden. That's how our brain works.
How do you differentiate between structured literacy and generic methods?
Structured literacy is another way of Orton Gillingham. It's multi-sensory structure. That's where it comes from. So let me ask you a question. When you were working, what was for your career, what did you do predominantly?
IT.
Okay. Did things change that much since when you were a kid until you retired from that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And the structured literacy, it hasn't changed much.
Okay.
So again, what I go back to
Can you define what structured literacy is?
is that Structured literacy is another way of saying Orton Gillingham multisensory. So what Dr. Orton found, remember he passed away in 48, is that to overcome dyslexia, you use multisenses, seeing, touching, hearing. All right, let me give you an example of how going past that. So let's say, could you imagine a student who's writing essentially randomly placed misspelled words? They can't even write a basic 3-word sentence.
Sure. I know adults
Okay.
that can't do that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to show you how to fix that in about 5 minutes. All right. Orton Gillingham would take you about, it's 2 years to learn structured literacy, $11,000 in a non-for-profit. It would take you weeks to learn this. So I'm going to show you how to do it in 5 minutes. So let's call, I'm just going to use an example I use all the time. Her name is Sarah. She's 10 years old. Her favorite thing in the world is swimming. Swims. She's on the swim team, swims every chance she gets. So what we have you do is we have you type out, not handwrite, type out on a keyboard, not an iPad, not an iPhone, a real keyboard, usually a laptop. Hero plus sign, what are we talking about? We replace hero with Sarah. Sarah plus sign, what are we talking about? We replace what are we talking about with swimming? Sarah plus sign swimming. See how we got there? Okay. Now, here's my question. 90% of special ed teachers, when I do this at major conferences, get it wrong because they don't follow exactly what I'm saying. Here's my question. You have to follow it exactly. Does Sarah like or dislike swimming?
He likes.
Okay. Replace that word with a plus sign. What's the 3-word sentence?
Sarah likes swimming.
Yes, but that's not what I asked. I asked, does Sarah like or dislike swimming? You automatically added the yes and you replaced it. And when we got Sarah likes swimming. But Sarah would say like because that's what I asked her. She doesn't know how to add the S.
Sarah
So
likes
now,
swimming.
right, you automatically add that because you know how to do it. You're educated. She can't.
Right. Okay.
So structured literacy is literally a multisensory approach on how to use seeing, touching, hearing, all the senses and all these other ideas on how to get Sarah to add the letter S. And it's complicated as all heck. We need a much more simplified approach. And my one caveat is I expect the child to be able to speak proper English. If the parents speak proper English, generally you find the children do as well. So with that caveat, I'll ask Sarah, do you like or dislike swimming? Like. Okay, replace the plus sign. Sarah likes swimming. But how do we get her to add the yes? I would ask Sarah to read it out loud. Then I would ask her, does it sound generally correct? She will say no. And I'll say, fix it. So she fixes it. Sarah likes swimming. Now, that's one part. The second part is I want you to imagine we do that, with 10 likes and 10 dislikes. Then we go on to reason. We start off with reason 1. Sarah likes swimming because it's fun. But she's starting to probably making a lot of spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes. So what we do is we tell the child before you put down the period, you can ask any question. Once you drop the period, if you make a mistake, you got to retype the entire sentence. That's a spelling mistake or a major, and I mean major grammatical mistake. Or if before the period, you can just ask, did I spell swimming correctly? And we'll tell you, and then you just have to retype that word. What do the kids do? They drop the period. So then they say, oh, I got to rewrite the entire sentence. I say one of two things. You made a silly mistake or a silly error. One of those two. They're the least offensive. So as she's going through this, she's like, I'm not going to make that mistake, like misspelling swimming. 7 times down, she's still misspelling the word. I'm not going to make that mistake. And she hyper concentrates more and more to where it's the concentration you see like chess masters at the world championship. And she's hyper concentrating, and that's where the magic happens. So sometime between number 3 or number 12, she finally gets it right, and you can move on. And you're going to find her keep making that mistake, hyper concentrating because she has to retype the whole thing. She keeps dropping the period until it eventually corrects itself. And as you do that to reason 1, we do that 20 times, reason 1 and reason 2, 20 times, reason 1, reason 2, and reason 3, 20 times. By the time you get done with 80 sentences correctly, we have now taken that child from writing at the kindergarten level to end of 2nd grade, beginning 3rd grade.
I wish my wife was on this interview because she probably would understand a lot of what you're saying.
Well, do you see how simple what I just told you was?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, for your wife as a special ed teacher, the way that she was trained, Yeah, she can take a kid from kindergarten or beginning first grade to the end of second, beginning third grade. Of course she can. Going to take a lot longer using the other methods. So structured literacy, this is the exact opposite, because what I'm doing is, again, I am focusing on the front part of the brain, and I'm not trying to focus on what's going on in the back. That's really oversimplifying neural activity. But there we just had a multiple grade level improvement. And for a young kid, that might take a couple of, I had some students take 2 months to go through that because, they're 7. All right. But if I have a kid in college age who can't do that, they'll go through that drastically faster. I had one kid who had just horrendous writing. He was through that in 3 days. The older you are, the quicker you go through it. So it's that we just continue with that type of process through the solution. It's all for me to teach your wife how to take a kid from I can't write a basic sentence all the way through, let's say, 8th grade level writing. I can do that within 6 hours. It's that simple. Not weeks, not months, a day. Parents take a little longer, and that's why we have a weekly webinar for them. Parents can do this. You can do this. This is not that complicated. And you try it, things aren't working out. We meet every week, and you ask me what's going on. Okay, here's the problem you're having. Here's how you fix it. And then you just keep going. And it's not that hard to do.
If you know what you're doing, it's not that hard to do.
As I said, I just went through it really fast. If you went back and replayed that a couple of times, ask a few questions, you could start doing it as well. It's really, I've had 14-year-old AP English girls do this very successfully.
So, can you share the key steps to fostering confidence in dyslexic children?
The first thing that you need to do is two primary things. Get them within their speciality for at least a semester. Okay. Or if they've already graduated, find out what their speciality is and work with them to overcome their concerns in that area. And stop trying to teach these kids from the general to the specific. You have to teach them from the specific to the general. So, for example, if you were to ask very standard civil rights question in history, what effect did Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech have in the 1960 civil rights movement? The dyslexic has no idea what to do. I mean, because we're thinking so fast, so chaotically, there's nothing to latch onto. But if we ask the dyslexic student what personally compelled Martin Luther King to want to give his famous I Have a Dream speech, well, that's something we can bite into. It's a very specific point, and we can go through his biography, appropriate journal articles, find out what that is, and then ask questions. What's the next question? What's the next question? It forces us to think in a linear step-by-step manner. And all I do is I show students how to practice that so many times that it becomes part of them. We organize the chaos, and then the spelling, grammar, and all those issues tend to self-correct in a huge way.
Awesome. So, how do you view the role of passion in dyslexic learning?
If a dyslexic is outside their speciality, even with the most motivated kid in the world, you're down 50%. Most students, you're down 75, 80%. You're literally shooting yourself in the foot. So if they're not in their speciality, in their area of extreme interest and ability, it's pretty much a lost cause. Even with the most motivated kid, they're still going to underperform hugely. Find out a combination of what they're interested in. Maybe it's not what they're most interested in, but what they at least have some interest in, and help them find a college major and future employment based on that. So if for example, you were in IT, why did you go into it? Why not something else?
Well, I actually transitioned from law enforcement to IT, and I did that because my wife and I got married May of 1990, and she wasn't real thrilled with me working at night and wondering if I was going to come home in one piece in the morning, right? And so it's a long story, but I got into IT, and I just like fixing things. I like solving problems so that people can do their jobs, right? And we're talking
And you were
about
very good at it. Now, what is something that is you would expect for intellectual work that you're just horrible at?
me personally.
Yes, something that you're just absolutely just horrible at.
Well, I suck at math. Does that count?
Okay. So imagine that your future employment, let's go back to when you're married and you were told, well, congratulations, you're going to become a math professor. If you can't do that, you're unemployed. How do you think that would make you feel?
I would have been like, oh shit, I guess I'm unemployed.
That's dyslexia. Okay. That's essentially what our system requires students to become well-rounded educationally before they can specialize. So let me ask you this. Let's go back to your wife. She went into special education. Now, she was able to become well-rounded. She learned what she was supposed to as an undergrad. But if she was dyslexic, she would have just wanted to become a special ed teacher. She wouldn't have wanted to done all the other stuff, and she somehow would have gotten through it. All right. But once she was in grad school, do you think her professors cared at all if she could do a calculus problem? They could care less. We are a society of specialists. You were in law enforcement, very specialized. You were in IT, very specialized. Nobody cared about your ability if you could read Shakespeare in IT. They just don't care. Okay. So what we need to do with the dyslexic is it's like telling you you're going to be a math professor. And you're just like, well, I'm going to be unemployed. That's exactly what it feels like to be a dyslexic. So how do we break this cycle that just hasn't stopped since the kid was in first grade? What you have to do is focus on their specialty for a semester, or if they're out of college, find something they're really interested in. Maybe take some additional training courses in it. You can go to there's a place called Udemy, Udemy, trains you in just about anything out there. Maybe take some of those classes at home. All right, focus on their specialty, learn from the specific to the general, and let me show you how to do context through problem, and they'll be fine. It really comes down to being that simple.
Hey, let me share this website that you said you wanted me to share while we were talking.
It's
Getting there. There we go.
Yeah, we give you a customized link to that. So what happens is if parents have a concern, kind of discusses what we discussed in the podcast today, the 3 reasons your child's dyslexia education isn't working and how to fix it. And you just fill out the form. We set up a 15-minute conversation. And all I do is ask those 2 questions to your dyslexic child and ask, is this how they'd like to overcome their concerns? And the vast majority of the time, it's yes. And then it's simply a matter of arranging for me to invite the parents into the process. And the key thing is to make things affordable. We show the parents how to do this themselves. You're not spending $150 to $300 an hour for an Orton Gillingham certified tutor, who, by the way, I'm not joking, Upper East Side family. I saw this so many times. They would start working with a child when they're in 6th grade. And then when they're in their master's program, they're still working with them. Stuff hasn't changed a lot since the 1950s.
I got you. So if I show that link that you sent me an email in my show notes, they can get to it.
Yeah, they just click on that and fill the form out. And we're here to help you get right back to you. Set up a convenient time, and we just show you how to do all this in 15 minutes.
It's awesome. Well, Russell, I appreciate you being on the podcast episode today. You shared a lot of good information. Some of it went right over my head, but hopefully the listening audience will pick up on a lot of that, or at least contact you and go from there. So,
well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap up this episode of ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. I hope today's conversation gave you some encouragement and practical steps you can try in your own family. If you found this helpful, would you do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, share this episode with a friend who's also navigating the parenting journey, and leave a quick review. It really helps others find this podcast. I'd also love to hear your stories. How are you working through these challenges with your adult children? Send me an email at talkpac@proton.me. That's talkpac@proton.me, or connect with me on social media. Links are in the show notes. Next week, we're going to talk with Rick and Clancy Denton with the Loud, Quiet, Empty Nest podcast. It's going to be a good one. Thanks for listening. And remember, parenting doesn't stop when they turn 18. It just changes shape. And thanks for the privilege of your time. And Russell, again, thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Please tune in next week for another episode of our podcast on parenting adult children.